So welcome to your first flipped algebra 2 video, intro video. So we're going to start by talking about some basic stuff. So this is just kind of refresh you. You've been gone for the summer. We're going to look at sums, differences, multiplication, and quotients. So basically adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. So when you are adding two integers with the same sign, just a reminder on how this works, what you're going to do is you are going to add the numbers, but you're going to keep the same sign. So what that basically is telling you is that a positive number plus a positive number remains positive. So 2 plus 3, I add the numbers and I get 5. These were both positive, so my answer is a positive 5. Now if both integers were negative, so if it was a negative 2 plus a negative 3, I would add the numbers 2 plus 3 and get 5 and keep the same sign, so it would remain a negative 5. Now if you're adding integers with different signs, what this is saying is if you're adding, for example, a negative 2 plus a 3. So the 2 is negative and the 3 is positive. So instead of adding the numbers, you are going to subtract the numbers. And always subtract the bigger minus the smaller, and then you keep the sign. I need to work on my handwriting here. Keep sign of the larger integer. Maybe I just need a new pen. I'll work on that. Alright, so negative 2 plus 3, here's the math you do in your head. You say, well, what's 3 minus 2, bigger minus small, and you get a 1. And then whatever the larger integer is, which is 3, you keep the same sign. So that's positive, so our answer is a positive 1. That also could look like, let's say, 2 plus a negative 3. Again, you would, because you're adding integers with opposite signs or different signs, you would subtract the bigger minus the smaller, and you would get 1. But because the bigger number was negative, that means our answer will be negative, and that one comes out as a negative 1. Alright, with subtracting integers, what you can do is this thing called add the opposite, or add up. Or maybe you had a middle school teacher call it keep, change, change. So what that's saying is, if I'm saying 3 minus 2, basically turn it into an addition problem. 3 plus, so you change this to addition, and then you just have to make the next number opposite. So because that's a 2, we're going to make it a negative 2. And then it turns into the problem that we had above, 3 plus a negative 2. We would opposite signs, we would subtract. 3 minus 2 was 1, keep the sign of the bigger number. I don't remember what that was for, so we'll just keep that. So basically, if you're subtracting integers, you can change every subtraction into addition as long as you make the following number the opposite sign. So you could say, just to show you what it looks like with a negative number, 4 minus a negative 2. So here's your subtraction. We're going to make the subtraction addition, and then the next number has to change signs. Because it's a negative 2, we would make it a positive 2, and that gives us 4 plus 2, same sign, add the numbers, keep the sign. We get 6. Alright, so we're throwing a bunch of basic stuff into this lesson. Order of operations, you guys know this, but let's just go over it again. That's your PEMDAS. So P, if you've had me before, you know I like to write this vertically. P-E, M-D on the same line, and A-S on the same line. P is parentheses, so pretend I just wrote that out. Go ahead and write it out. E is for exponents. The M and the D, that's your multiplying and dividing, but remember you have to do that in order left to right, or whichever one comes first. And then the addition and subtraction, same thing, left to right, whichever comes first. Those, I would say, are the ones to be careful about, because that's where people tend to make the most mistakes with their order of operations. And then we have the distributive property. You guys know about that. Distributive property, anytime you have, let's say, I don't know, A times B plus C. So the distributive property tells you to distribute the number in front. It's basically multiplying. The a is being multiplied by the sum of b plus c, and if b and c are not like terms, we can't do that math, so we multiply separately. So a has to get multiplied to the b, so a times b is ab, and then a has to get multiplied to the c, and because that's a positive times a positive, we're going to say plus ac. So just a little quick refresher, that's your distributive property. Moving on to our rules for multiplication. So if you are multiplying numbers with the same sign, your answer will be positive. So positive answer. So for example, 2 times 3 equals a positive 6. If I was multiplying negative 2 times negative 3, same sign, they're both negatives, you get a positive answer, 6. If you are multiplying numbers with different signs, you will always have a negative answer. So 2 times a negative 3, there's a positive times a negative, will come out negative. Alright, and then this is a good one just to keep in mind. If you're multiplying 3 or more numbers, if you have an even number of negatives, so for example, let's say negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 4. So your answer, if you have an even number, oh, that's not an even number of negatives. Negative 5. There we go. Here's a negative, 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 negative. So there's 4 negative numbers. You will have a positive answer if you have an even number of negatives. And if you multiply that out, hand 2 at a time, you'll get that answer. Negative 2 times negative 3 is 6. 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Negative 24 times negative 5 turns out to be a positive 120. So, but just a shortcut way to know that you're going to get a positive answer, you can just multiply the 4 numbers and say you had an even number, make it positive. Now if you have an odd number of negatives, you will have a negative answer. So for example, if you're doing negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 4, so I'm multiplying 3 negatives, I know it's going to be a negative, and then I can just do 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 4 is 24. It's just a little bit of a shortcut way through that. Alright, moving on to division, quotients. Anytime you guys see that word, we are talking about division. So the rules for division are the same as multiplication. What that means is if you divide 2 negative numbers, you get a positive answer. If you divide one of each, you get a negative answer. We've got a couple properties to throw in here. We have the property of the opposite of a product. So what that means is if you have a negative AB, that is going to be equal to a negative A times a positive B. Another way to look at that is it could be, or if you have a negative AB, it's possible that the B could be negative, just as long as one of those is negative. So you could have A times a negative B. Property of the opposite of a sum. So if you have a negative in front of the sum, A plus B, that's equal to a negative A plus a negative B. So maybe you've seen before where if you have a negative in front of parentheses, you can throw a 1 right there, and it's just like distributing a negative 1, which is how you would get that negative A and that negative B. So just another way to look at that. We are going to see some examples that deal with fractions that look like this. So just a heads up, if you have a sum, A plus B, and they are both being divided by one thing on the bottom like that, one denominator, that's equal to A over C plus B over C. You can separate out that fraction. But one thing to notice is if you only have one numerator and 2 terms on the bottom, it's not equal to, I'm going to make that big, not equal to You cannot do the same thing. You can't do C over A plus C over B, because C has to be divided by A plus B, and here you can see C is only being divided by A. So just a couple things to keep straight there. And then our last slide for the intro video. This is something we saw in algebra, but maybe you haven't seen it since then. There is a difference between these two values, and it's a common mistake that comes up. If you look at it, you notice the difference is the parentheses. So just remember, if this negative right there is inside that parentheses, that means that your base, remember you have a base and an exponent, so the base is -2 and the exponent is 2. That means your base is negative, so you're multiplying two -2's. -2 times -2 is 4. Now in this first example you can see that the negative is not in parentheses, which means it's actually not connected to that 2. Even though in our mind we think it is, the parentheses is what keeps the negative with the 2. So what we do is order of operations tells us to do the exponent first. We square the 2. 2 squared is 4. And then the negative, it's technically like a -1 out in front. So -1 times 4, you do end up with a negative answer there. So just be careful on those. Those are easy to miss. Alright, and then just for fun, at the end of the intro video, I thought maybe I'd try something new this year. I have a little song in here to see if you guys know what it is. These are all going to be songs that I think are good for you to know in some way. So let me see if I can get this one to play. I'll just play it for a little bit for you to see if you know it. Alright, so the song actually does continue beyond that, so I just played a little snippet for you. So in the when you answer the review questions online, go ahead and let me know if you know who that is and what song it is. And if you don't know it, if you don't know it, this is definitely a band that you should know for your musical education. Alright, intro video done.